Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this edition of the LinkedIn Live event. I am your host, Suresh GP. I'm so glad that you have taken your time to be with us today in this edition of the SRE Practitioner Series. As you know, site reliability engineering is becoming very popular these days, and I thought it would be important for us to understand how we can work through this whole approach in a manner that it will make us the most important exercise of making it work, right? So I'm going to talk about um, the presentation today about the site reliability engineering practitioner. So if you are tuning in today, please put it on the chat window. Where are you dialing in from, and what is your expectations to learn from this LinkedIn Live series? Okay. So as we start getting in people, we'll give a couple of more minutes for people to log in, and then we will get this started off. So as I start to look at people, one of the things that I would really expect people to bring in is your real world questions. Or if you're a practicing site reliability engineer, what are some of the challenges that you see that is important for you to get addressed in updating it over, right? So all of those stuff is something that we're going to talk about. And also, as we start to look at this whole exercise, we also need to ask the right questions for us. Thanks, Munis, another way from Chennai. Nice to see you. As we start to get through this exercise, one of the things that I struggle to see whenever people talk about a lot of these scenarios is how can you apply site reliability engineering in the world of DevOps and Agile and ITSM. So a lot of these changes have happened, and I wanted to kind of start with some basic elements of what we are going to talk about. So I'm going to go one by one and share my screen as we go through this window and see how we can make this work, right? So, as we see today, our focus, my name is Suresh GP. I'm the managing director of TaUB Solutions. I'm also the global ambassador of DevOps Institute. And I'm also the regional leader for Asia Pacific. I'm also an international speaker. Overall, 20 years in the industry, starting from IT service management, IT governance, organizational change management. In the last few years has been on Agile, DevOps, and site reliability engineering. I've been a speaker at ITSMF conferences worldwide. I was also awarded the ITSM Contributor of the Year 2013 by ITSMF Singapore. I'm also one of the HDI's top 25 influencers in service management and was a recipient of 4 Excellence Award at BRMP Connect in Washington, D.C. From a site reliability engineering perspective, I have trained over 1,200 plus people worldwide in the last year alone on Site Reliability Foundation. And I'm also the co-author of the SRE Practitioner course. So I'm happy to be involved, bringing in my real world experience of consulting, capability building exercise to the rest of the world. So what are we going to cover today is what is SRE Practitioner, why SRE profile has become one of the fastest growing enterprise roles, why is it important in building reliability and resilience, what are some of the benefits for organizations and individuals, how do you focus on non-abstract large-scale design, which is a key principle around site reliability engineering, what are some of the career opportunities, Q&A. We'll also talk about on the certification course. So we are an elite partner of the DevOps Institute, which we offer the SRE Foundation course as well as the SRE Practitioner course. The SRE Foundation course is a 2-day course, and an SRE Practitioner is a 3-day course that we are offering. So a lot more details are going to come. Throughout the session, as you start to have any questions, please feel free to ask us if you have any questions, right? So we have Shelly. Let's see. Let's get people. Jonathan, thanks for joining us from Peru. We have Shelly Bowman joining in from Washington, D.C. Great to meet you, Shelly. We have Naveen, USA, trying to move into DevOps roles. Naveen Patil, great to hear from you. We have Shilpa Rath from Texas as well. So that's a great scope of people who are here. And I really thank you for being in part of this episode, right? Okay, so let's get into our mode. I'm trying to see if I can make this as a element that I can upload so that it is much more easier for us to watch. So I hope you, Karthik, thanks Karthik. I know it's pretty late from Singapore, but really appreciate you joining in for this edition of the SRE Practitioner. So thank you so much, everyone. You had a choice to attend, but you made that time, and I will make sure that this time is fully utilized for making it a worthwhile experience, right? As we start to get this exercise done, I also think that it's important for us to think about. I think I'll remove this one. To understand the starting questions, I see Aravind Magam joining from Bangalore. We have a LinkedIn user joining from Dallas. Kishore from Dallas, Texas. Excellent. So we're getting a good amount of people joining in, and I hope you were clear about what we wanted to present. So I'm going to go ahead straight away and start presenting the background and context. So, as you know, the Upskilling IT report was just launched yesterday, and TaUB Solutions is one of the proud supporters and sponsors of the Upskilling IT report. And we had some fascinating outcomes that came out of the report. Now, as you know, and this is from the Catchpoint report, IT has to now deliver more business value, right? So we have moved away from the concept of having uptime, customer experiences, focusing on reliability and resilience, to focus on business value, right? And Shelly was there in a session last week where we were talking about business relationship management. How are you going to help organizations to achieve business outcomes? So at the end of the day, business doesn't care whether you're doing agile, DevOps, or IT service management or SRE. Are we delivering business outcomes? I think if you are a site reliability engineer, you should start thinking about what definitive outcomes that I'm trying to bring to the table that will deliver the most value and ensuring that business value is realized. So, top 3 challenges that were brought in as part of the DevOps upskilling report was 40% reported insufficient skills and resources. So this is why I'm doing this session on site reliability engineering, because site reliability engineering is one of the top 3 jobs according to LinkedIn's 2022 report. And here it is also validating that 40% of organizational are struggling to get the right level of resources. As you're all aware about the Great Resignation, it becomes important for us to hire the right talent for the right purpose. 37% are citing budget and funding issues, but I think that is changing because remember, this was just the last 2 years about the pandemic. So they were really protective of the amount being spent. But now as we start to go into the next journey, we will probably be able to spend money, right? The 35%, the last one is very interesting because managing technical debt or avoiding technical debt is one of the top 3 reasons why organizations are struggling. That means if you are in the pipeline of your DevOps journey, how much of your time are you focusing on refactoring? How much of your time are you focusing on reducing technical debt? And that's a very important part. And both for the first and the third, there is a direct proportion to how site reliability engineers are going to make a difference in how we operate. By 2030, There will be a global human talent shortage of more than 85 million people, or roughly equivalent to the population of Germany. Left unchecked in 2030, that talent shortage could result in about 8.5 trillion in unrealized annual revenues. Only 29% of the tech companies believe that they have the right talent. 29%. So think about, if your organization, do you have the right IT talent? There will be a global shortage of over 545,000 software developers by 2026. And you know what happened to the great resignation. 4 million Americans quit their job in July 2021. So what does it say? There is a huge surge in skills required, and site reliability engineering is going to be on top front. Now, from a global perspective, if you want to look at top 5 skills and capabilities that organizations are thriving, there are 5 buckets that you can allocate these into. One is the process and frameworks, where you have DevOps, DevSecOps, Agile, site reliability engineering, design thinking, value stream management. And as you know, DevOps Institute is offering courses on all of these aspects. Then we come to automation. So if you are doing DevOps, how are we going to focus on continuous integration, deployment, delivery, testing? So you see, DevSecOps is getting a lot more popular as well. And if you're a site reliability engineer, I would say that you also focus on the security elements, because reliability is not a question of just availability. How can you make sure that the vulnerabilities and threats are detected much earlier in the life cycle? You know about the SolarWinds hack that happened, that shook the whole world apart, and now recently Log4j. So there is so much reasons why something will fail, and it's important that site reliability engineers and DevSecOps work hand in hand to holistically focus on the value proposition around it. Then I think human skills. I think we talk about humans of DevOps in the DevOps Institute. They focus on collaboration, problem solving, communication skill, sharing and knowledge, right? So today, I think the world is focused on having autonomous squads and teams and pods. So how are we going to relate with that customer experience and making sure that the humans of DevOps are appreciated, right? You can have the sophisticated of tools in the world, but if you're not bringing in the right level of acumen and human skills, human are the right assets to build that. And then you have technology skills of containerizations, cloud platform, but also leadership skills. Now, leadership skills are transforming from, in the agile world, we talked about servant leadership. Now we are talking about transformational leadership. So how do we bring in those facets in your own organization? So whether you are an individual or an organization, look at things from all these 5 aspects: your process and framework skills, your leadership skills, your technology skills, human skills, and automation skills, because these are the top 5 skill capabilities and top 5 skills that every organization would love to have. From a priorities from a CIO perspective, I find it very interesting from the State of CIO report of 2022. The security management is about 51% as part of top activities of CIO focus, but 43% talks about improving IT operations and systems, which is invariably relating to reliability and resilience. It also talks about modernizing your infrastructure and applications. How do you move from monolithic applications to microservices? How do you move towards containers? All of those stuff are critical component of it. So if you look at 40% on modernizing infrastructure and applications, 43% on improving IT operations, and 51% on security management, that is a huge number in emphasizing on how much importance reliability and resilience is part of the value chain. It's also interesting about the frameworks, and you can have a look at the report later. So there's a huge focus on DevSecOps. It's about 47%. 45% still think Agile is needed, and 40%, top 3, has got site reliability engineering. And at the bottom, you have also chaos engineering. So there's a lot of frameworks and practices that are being focused upon in the whole scheme of things. So what do we cover as part of the Site Reliability Engineering Foundation? Some of you have already done with us as TaUB Solutions. Some of you would like to know, what do you cover as part of Site Reliability Engineering Foundation? So the foundation course is a 2-day course that we address some of these elements, which is on the culture change. How do you work with people, cross-functional teams working towards a common unified purpose, like a service level objectives? How do you reduce toil? Anything which is manual, repeatable, automatable, tactical, devoid of enduring value. How do you work through that? And how do we focus on SLOs and SLIs, service level objectives, which is more focused on customer experience than measurement? So, because many of the organizations focus on monitoring, but monitoring is just the starting point. We are going into observability, where monitoring is showing us a set of symptoms. Observability is giving you a larger picture of the reasons that something would happen. And then we focus on anti-fragility. A famous example would be chaos engineering from the Netflix. So they are focused on ensuring that the systems are resilient, and they do a lot of experimentation. You don't need to have it in production environment, because today we, with Toxic Proxy, with Gremlin, with Chaos Toolkit, there are so much opportunities for you to experiment. We are doing a lot of consulting, training, and simulations with large financial institutions, and we have already seen a good adoption of chaos engineering. So gone are the days that we thought that chaos engineering is only for Netflix. So there's a lot of push around organizations to experiment on your infrastructure layer. How do you share the workload? What are the different deployment patterns, like A/B, your canary deployments, your A/B deployments, your runtime upgrades? Look at performance management and incident management, right? So how is the world of incident management going to also change with the way of working? That's also being dealt in the scheme of things. So as we start to see this whole approach, one of the things I think is very important for all of us is to understand what is most important for us to focus on. Where do you think our focus should be on building that ecosystem? And that is something that I think what is important is to focus on our primary goal, on how we can make that really a useful exercise. And it takes time, right? And I tell people, if you are into an SRE journey, you need to give a good amount of 2 to 3 years to fully get the value of site reliability engineering. It's so much happening around, different moving parts that we need to handle. And that is something that we need to take into consideration of how we can manage expectations on making it work. So as site reliability engineers, what we have to understand is our primary focus is on reliability and resilience. So our focus on reliability means that the ability of a system or an application to perform its desired function without undergoing failure. So we are looking at MTTD. We are looking at opportunities where it's much more than it is much more than just reliability part of it. It's looking at opportunities where we focus on something very important called resilience. Now, what does resilience mean for us, right? Resilience means the ability to bounce back if something goes wrong, right? So that's the part that we are talking about as element of resilience, that ability to bounce back if there is an unplanned outage. Many of the clients that we discuss, they say, we don't want to have outages. Now, this is possible as you start going towards microservices, because microservices provides you an opportunity that you can, if something is broken, you can just cull that out and the remaining can still remain intact. So there's a lot of application modernization that happens in the world that will need site reliability engineering to work, because you have a distributed environment and not everything is managed. I am doing a couple of consulting engagements in Canada where one of our customer is having distributed environments. So not only the application layer is managed by them, the infrastructure layer is managed by another team, the operations layer is managed by another team. So how do you work with SLOs by boundaries? So it becomes very difficult in how we navigate through this whole section. So in reality, if you want to build teams, so you have dev teams that focus on code delivery. So you have your own platform engineering at the bottom, and site reliability engineering is focusing on reducing toil, looking at service level objectives, escalation handling. But I think at the bottom, you need to have a common environment. And that's the reason where the concept of platform engineering is getting more popular these days than anybody else. So everybody understands that we need to have a dedicated team that takes care of our cloud operations, that takes care of our reliability part of it, that reduces our toil, that improves our SLO, you name it. So we have to have a combination of developer tools, which your hooks and integrated development environment. You have your own source code repository and tool chains. Look at app delivery, production environments. So, for example, infrastructure as a code, and also making sure your runbook automation, alerts, and metrics are working without any issues. So, so typically, if I break down the traditional IT ops model to an SRE ops model, it's probably very distinct, right? So in a traditional ops model, we had dev and ops separately, right? We were waiting for handoffs. We have something called as early lifecycle support. So by the time you do your release and then you drop this off and then go over. But that in an SRE based model, your SREs are embedded as part of your product lifecycle. We also have to look at just not incident resolution, which is like a workaround. We need to focus on something like a permanent fixes. Because think about it for a while. If I provide an incident resolution with workarounds, by the time I release it and 3 days later the same issue happens, then the user experience is bad. So our focus is to build a proactive assurance of stability and continuous improvement, and have those people who could do multiple things, right? So site reliability engineers should have a good understanding about development, your testing, your architecture, your infrastructure piece. So they are really Avengers, right? The superheroes and heroines of the world. So they need to know something about everything, right? So getting some practical experience of connecting the dots is going to be important. And how are we going to expedite our resolution? So I think the world is moving away from reactive to proactive to predictive, right? In reactive, we talked about incident management. In proactive, we talk about your event monitoring, event correlation. But the world is moving towards predictiveness, and that's where we talk about observability, we talk about AOps, we talk about machine learning. So if an Exchange server goes down, how do I automatically create a ticket in ServiceNow and then automatically remediate it? So you don't really need to have it. In one of the customers, we have replaced 25% of the task force with chatbot. So today, I think you look at the question of what is the value of a level 1 support engineer? Why do you need to have level 1 support? We can actually do these things much more easy from the manner of auto resolution. So you have to reduce the number of incidents and focus on most important activities. So automation is not going to get rid of our jobs. It's about our focus of SREs to focus on. SRE's role is not about keeping the lights on. Let's be very honest. You build systems in a manner that they are self-sufficient. I think that's the whole intent of how we are driving this whole conversation towards making it self-explicitly running through this whole organization. Now, this is an interesting slide which came from the State of SRE report, asking people at what stage in the site reliability engineering journey is your organization currently? 6% are immature, where they do not have SRE implemented formally, but they adhere to SRE principles as much as possible. 32% say they are emerging, which means they have established an SRE practice within the last 2 years. So it is at the beginning stage, 32%. Right? 42% say they are maturing. We have an SRE practice that has been in place for more than 2 years and are continually advancing our approach. And then 20% is on the advanced stage. So think about it. You already have about 92% people who are in some way or the other, either on the emerging phase, maturing phase, or advanced phase. Now put it on the chat window. Based on this trend, in your respective organizations, where do you think your organization is in the site reliability engineering? Is it on the immature phase? Is it on the emerging phase? Is it on the maturing phase or advanced phase? Because I want to know the pulse of the audience here. Because at one end, we are saying that there is a huge uptake on SRE, but I really want to know the proof is in the pudding, right? So where do you think your organization is scaling up? Put it on the window as to where you think you're seeing the progress of conversion towards making this work, right? And the other aspect that I think the expectation on the site reliability engineering is the demand for site reliability engineer is increasing tremendously. I have already 4 or 5 positions that I need to close with my clients, and the clients are asking me, Suresh, can you provide on behalf of TaUB Solutions, SRE resources, because it's very difficult to help. And we are also helping organizations to build capability. So you can have any kind of a Unix or Wintel or any engineer, and how do we make them readily deployable to projects on SRE? So we're having a huge upskilling program or a factory model that we are building in because of growing the talent within your own groups, right? So if you look at from an expectation standpoint on what are the areas that they need to focus, this is coming from the SRE report, is 23% are focused on reducing MTTR, 12% are influencing architectural design, because I think we move from monolithic applications to microservice to containers. We actually are operating on a bimodal IT. There is a combination of open source tools to proprietary tools. So how do you manage that, right? 12% are building and maintaining automation code. 11% are designing experiments. This is like the hackathons. This is like the dojos, right? Where you are experimenting like a game day, where you're trying to find out opportunities to experiment and leverage the whole experience. 11% ensure security vulnerabilities. As I said, there is a thick relationship between site reliability engineering and DevSecOps. You cannot just deviate this across, because the reliability requires also the security elements of it. And 10% are designing experiments to running tests. System reliability. So I think we have lots and lots of need for an SRE. So think about in your organization, what is your primary objective that you are hiring SRE? Because each and every organization's need for an SRE is different. Not every company is Google and Apple or Netflix of the world. So you need to be very clear when we talk about reliability, what are we trying to achieve? Because if you have too many things on the plate for a site reliability engineering, I think you're going to bleed. So you need to be realistic of what is your outcome that you're expecting when you're deploying someone called a site reliability engineering, right? And what is going to be the delineation of responsibilities between the DevOps, the Ops team, the infrastructure team? How are you going to organize yourself in squads and pods? They are so important, because without getting to the organizational structure, understanding these elements, it's going to be very difficult to manage expectations, right? Let's see if you have any questions on this thing. So it's emerging, right? So Sai Prakash, thanks for joining. So you're saying it's emerging in your part of the world of how we see things emerging on those market, right? Right. So we'll continue on. Which of the following tasks do SREs in your organization dedicate? So please put it on the chat window, right? Is it reducing MTTR, for which you have hired your SREs? Is it for building and maintaining automation code? Is it ensuring security vulnerabilities, designing experiments? So among the top 3, where do you think your organization is focusing your effort on? Is it to reduce your MTTR, mean time to recover, mean time to repair, or mean time to restore your service? Building and maintaining automation code? Or where do you think? Because these are top 2 indicators of how organizations worldwide are spending the last good amount of time on an average on a week. So what's been your experience in driving that conversations? So that's something that you need to ask for yourself. Are we doing justice to hire someone like an SRE? Are we giving them the right option for us to make it work, right? And I think we have to shift that gears from customer experience to, a customer experience. Now, what do you mean by customer experience? My friends, Alan Nance, Weston are in support world in Vegas and talking about XLA, because I'm a big fan of what I call as the experience level agreement. We have a separate workshop where we talk about experience level agreement and experience level things. But that's shifting gears from being a watermelon to a kiwi, right? You remember the watermelon experience, if you're all from service management, the SLAs all look green, but the moment I open the watermelon, it's bleeding red. The customer is simply bleeding, because all that you're measuring is more towards IT metrics and not business KPIs. So what I want you to think is, how do you move from a watermelon to a kiwi? Because the kiwi gives you an opportunity to have business KPIs, which is green, outside and inside, right? So that's a very important part of distinctions, that you don't focus on IT KPIs, because I think we are doing a far amount of great job of making IT look good, but we need to make business look profitable, business look good. And that's the whole indicator of how we are applying this whole thing. So what do you mean by that? So for example, in a traditional service management world, if I called up the service desk and I said, I have a problem, like, Houston, I have a problem. I'm not able to access my emails. So what do? You create a ticket and you give a ticket number of incident ticket number. You have a response time and resolution time. But the point is, from the time the issue was reported till the time it is restored, what happens? What is the moment over time? Do we even care about it? Because that's not part of our SLA. So as we start focusing on SLOs, which is the service level objectives, which is going over and above our SLA in SRE, it's about understanding the customer journey map. Because every touch point of in the interface are super important for us to understand how we're going to drive those behavioral change. And every delivery action, no matter how small or buried in the organization, affects the experience. We tell people would forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So that's a part of how we will need to run through that approach to do it, right? So let's see if you have any questions on the window, and C4S. So let's see. So Shelly says emerging as a company. Thanks for doing it. Karthik Raj says for all top three. So in terms of the task that I talked about, which was here in a minute. So he talks about reducing MTTR, building and maintaining automation code, and ensuring relatability. So I think by and large, I see many of the organizations looking at all three options, right? Next one is one of the things that Sunita, thanks joining in from Bangalore, says MTTR and addressing vulnerability, right? And she's been involved in a security project. So it's very important for us to understand that they both go hand in hand, MTTR and addressing vulnerability. That's a great thing. So we'll come back to other questions. Watermelon to kiwi is an interesting story. Yeah. So think about no longer that the SLAs are all green. We need to start thinking about how do you focus on business value, right? Sai says a combination of the three. I think that's almost things. So that should not be the reason just because you actually fulfill those three reasons, right? It has to go beyond, right? So sometimes what happens is that we are on fire. So we need to douse the fire. But after dousing the fire, what happens, right? We have to go a larger purpose of why do you hire site reliability engineering as a purpose, right? So Sunita's question is, please give an example for SLO. So I understand that we are talking about service level objectives. So for example, Sunita, if we have current service level agreements at 95% for availability, I'm just taking an arbitrary example, right? And you are clearly meeting the service level agreements month over month, and it's all looking great. But the part that I want you to think about is beyond SLA, can I move towards 96% or 97%? So you go over and above the contractual obligations to finding out what is my customer experience. My customer wants probably 97%. For example, could be latency. How quickly are you able to load a page? So if you don't get a response less than 200 milliseconds, people are not happy, right? Today we live in a world of attention deficit syndrome. And that means that we are not really getting value out of those whole equations. So SLO is to improve your SLAs based on customer experience. So SLAs don't change, but SLOs keep on changing over a period of time. So our focus is to deliver more value. So for example, if you have a P1 incident, it's a 2 hours or a 4 hours window. Can you do it in 2 hours, right? You go over that extra mile to make that experience really valuable. So it's all about looking at improving your existing performance to focus and benchmark to deliver more value, because the value keeps on changing over a period of time. I hope that answers your question. The next question is from Shelley. How does SRE converge with overall business value? That's a great question. Now, many of the times that as we see organizations evolve, a part of the exercise is uh, business and IT. They don't have that language that is much more common. So many of the times when I see people talking the language, they talk either about technical language, technical jargons that puts people off. So from a site reliability engineering, and I get used to converse with leadership team to set up why SRE is important. And I tell these people that the primary reason that you are looking at a site reliability engineering is to focus on customer experience. And in your world of BRM, we talk about business partner experience. The business partner experience is, am I able to access IT on a need basis without having any downtime? Am I making it easy to get my reports, my dashboards on the click of a button? Am I getting analytics, valuable data that I can say that is my customer bleeding or having a great experience? So think about site reliability engineering is trying to bring in that value proposition to the business partners, to the customers in a manner that they could articulate, well, they made the life brilliant, right? So think about on a Thanksgiving week, on a Black Friday, if I tell you that I just have a few minutes of downtime, will you accept it? That's a huge business impact in terms of millions of dollars lost. So SRE is focusing on building high scale reliable systems that could actually focus on delivering continuous business value. And it has to be done in a manner which is much more business centric. I hope that answers the question. The SLO holds the key for getting business value. I completely agree with what Sai says, that the service level objective is the parameter that we focus on customer experience, in this case, the business partner experience, to do that, right? And SLO and SLI is basically the service level indicator, which is measurable targets to see how we can focus to making that work. Great questions. Keep that coming as we speak, and we will take it up from there. So going back to where we left, and customer experience, I'm going to talk about a concept called non-abstract large-scale design. So non-abstract large-scale design is one of the key elements that you need to have as part of being an SRE. And we teach this in the Site Reliability Engineering Practitioner course. Now, first, let's understand what do you mean by non-abstract large-scale design. So many of the times, as we start to go through this experience, we need to focus on a few elements. There are many ways to design distributed systems. What you have is you have your web server, you have your app server, there is another dependency component. So the entire topology is so complex, right? In the how we are able to manage your pipeline. So one way is to grow systems organically, where you design everything on your own. It is all within your own control. Or start with a proof of concept. Like it's basically trying to look at certain numbers. We call it as crunching your numbers and see how it works. So the way we look at it is have a design process, because many of the times as an SRE, you need to scale up systems. So if you have 100,000 users today accessing your application, suddenly if I reach to 1 million users, is your system capable of handling that workload without the level of performance degradation or what we call as graceful degradation or latency issues? How do you manage that? So every time you do these iterations, you identify potential aspects that could help us to identify strengths and weaknesses and say how we can work through this whole experience of iterating to get this value, right? And so what is non-abstract large-scale design? So non-abstract large-scale design is an iterative process for designing, assessing, evaluating distributed systems. So for example, a cluster management or distributed computing. So one of the necessary skill of a site reliability engineering is to assess, design, and evaluate large systems. Because when we talk about reliability as a key parameter, how are you designing systems for high scale availability? Now you have to be very careful. Not every system is on cloud. I know a lot of financial institutions that we are consulting and training, they are all still in on-prem. We have large systems which are on-premise. We are looking at big mainframe systems and other stuff. It's basically very difficult if you don't have that skills. So practically, non-abstract large-scale design combines the capacity planning that we used to do as part of IT service management, component isolation. So, like for example, if there is a failure, how do you manage failures? Graceful system leadership. It could be as simple as your load balancer, right? How do we focus on shifting the load from one system to another system? And also have productive, high available systems in how we work through it. So why non-abstract? Why is there is a large push? And if you go to SRE at Google, you will say that there is a prerequisite to have non-abstract, large-scale design kind of knowledge. See, all systems will eventually have to run on real computers in real data centers. You are using real networks. Let's be very honest. Let's not be kidding, right? We are not running it in a paper and say that, oh, now this is X number of users, so you should be good. No, you have to show it in practice, demonstrate how are we going to manage that. So the people designing distributed systems need to develop and continuously exercise the muscle of turning a whiteboard design to concrete estimates to how it works. So this is a very important skill. So it starts probably in a whiteboard where we start to look at your existing data, your historical evidence of the number of transactions per second. Think about all your golden signals of monitoring of saturation, utilization, error codes, latency, all of those stuff, right? But you need to have historical data to see how is your performance, right? How much is the tracer report looks like? How is the number of hops, right? And then start to do the extra bit of work to look at some of the constraints, because everybody, as you know, the theory of constraints, there are some constraints that you cannot add infinite, buffer in terms of RAM and CPU and other stuff. It probably has got its own constraints depending on what kind of an environment that you opt for. So the value of this exercise is trying to be doing the brainstorming, crunching numbers, having historical things, and get a better understanding of how to design systems. So it's an iterative approach, but it gets better in how you work through this whole exercise, right? So think about, is the design even possible? Are we going to focus on RAM, CPU, network bandwidth? Can we do this better? If you have X amount of performance today, can I do it much more important, improvise the whole reliability aspects of it? Or is it feasible to do it? Is it resilient? Now, how do you test resilience, right? You have your stress test, you have your regression test, you might have your real user monitoring, you might have your synthetic monitoring. How are we going to put that into judicious use? And I think as a part of the SRE practitioner course, we have a case study that you have to do it. So it is not about listening to our own stories, but you have to start thinking about if an environment is with X number of users to Y number of users, what are the areas that you need to think about? You can have your own assumptions. You need to look at some of the data points that we need to collect, and then start focusing on desirable results. So if you are an SRE practitioner, I think one of the skills that is needed to be deployed as an SRE is non-abstract large-scale design. So there's a whole lot of things available in SRE resource that I will see at the last that you can go and understand how we work through it, right? Okay, let's see if we have any questions on the system. How is SRE different from service or business continuity specialist? That's a good question. Now, site reliability engineering, the way that I look at site reliability engineering is just not keeping the lights on, right? In business continuity, we focused on keeping the lights on part of it. They're even trying to focus on preventing an incident from happening. How much time can you afford to have downtime? So the site reliability engineering focus is to prevent even downtime from happening. And that's a very different perspective of being from reactive to proactive to predictive. The business continuity has a reasonable level of predictions, but then they do much more towards making it. So that skills are important. But I think you start from the design phase itself to build that reliability, but also make sure that the site reliability engineer is not just restricting yourself to keeping the lights on. He's preventing incidents from happening, and they can get auto resolved. So the life to make your life of the customer, the employees much easier is what we are focusing on, right? So that's what we kind of look at it. So why is SRE getting popular? So I did an article, and this is available, is why is SRE role getting popular? 8 reasons site reliability engineering is one of the most in-demand jobs in 2022. So if you're looking for a job in IT, we were interviewed by the DevOps Institute and we posted up. And one of the things that I posted it as part of my perspective on the SRE need is removal of performance bottleneck. So think about it. Over the last few years, site reliability engineering teams have reduced significant amount of toil across the deployment pipeline, reduced technical debt, and ensured improved customer experiences. So SRE has been the only approach to derive the value you get from something running in production and help recalibrate design and development for sustainable business value. So one of the key things I think SRE is getting a lot more popular is to remove the performance bottleneck in your pipeline, right? Be it your infrastructure, things to deliver operational resilience. Because at the end of the day, SRE is about building that operational resilience. So what are the other top 7 reasons that the report says is reliable service depends on SRE talent. So you look at reliability from a different pair of lens altogether. SREs can keep up with competitive market prices. So the demand of SRE is growing and they are looking at making a life a lot more easy. So we are trying to break the siloed process between dev and ops, providing a bridge between development and operations. And also, as we start getting popularity, because if you remember, 2008-9, we started with DevOps. But as we start getting mature towards cloud and adoptions, it is absolutely imperative that SRE roles are getting even more important because it's not just about the fit for purpose, which we call as utility in IT service management. It is also about warranty, right? The capacity, the continuity, the security. This is where, Sunita, we talk about all these fit for use aspects is being governed now by the SRE. And they have a very important role to play there. And as you see the distributed systems, it gets even more complicated. And how do you get real-time solutions of making it work? And software development has made a shift because we are not just focusing on velocity. We are not focusing on velocity and stability. We are now focusing on reliability and resilience. And that is changing the whole gears of how customers will stay with you or not, right? So these are top 7 reasons. And my reasons I already explained are getting the reasons why SRE is getting a lot more popular, right? So in your organizations, what do you think is important? The way of making it work. So yeah, so I think Sai is doing a great job of responding to the query of that. Great. So keep the conversation going because each and every one of you are sharing your knowledge and experience. And that's the whole part of this LinkedIn live session, right? We are initiating and triggering conversation that we keep on making that work appropriately, right? So SRE is focusing on reliability of the production and SRE takes this knowledge back to DevOps. Absolutely true. And going back to the wisdom of production, I tell a word called wisdom of production. Every SRE has got tons and tons of experience managing real life situation. I used to be part of Hot Seat for about 10 years. And I realized that so much of wisdom is there with your operations team. How do you feed back the wisdom of production back to the development team so that they can take advantage of those learning experience and make it work? So absolutely spot on in how we work through it. Okay. So there are different evolution stages and how we work through this whole exercise. So you can decide as an organization how we are going to evolve. So focusing on observability, telemetry, chaos engineering, self-healing, self-service, you decide what is the way that you would want your organization's maturity to scale up as we start to move over, right? How are SREs going to be embedded? Some of the SREs are embedded SREs. That means you take part from the starting point of the life cycle. You have distributed SREs like a shared SRE, depending on that. You might also have tools-only SREs or infrastructure SREs. So it's up to you. Depending on the organization that you serve, you decide how you want to play around this whole exercise. Right. So now we're coming into our final ultimatum things that the Site Reliability Engineering Practitioner is a 3-day course. And I'm very happy to tell you that we have an upcoming course, 27, 28, 29, which is Friday, Saturday, Sunday at 8 a.m. Eastern to 2 p.m. Eastern. I'm going to show you that and you can register for it. Anybody who would like to know more about it can learn. And now recently they've made that you don't need to have SRE Foundation to do SRE Practitioner, but if you have the knowledge and the basic things. So we spend the first 1 hour to regroup on the concept part and we focus on all these elements. And you can look at this part of some of the anti-patterns, full stack observability, what is platform SRE, how do you define SLOs with distributed systems, how do you look at non-abstract large-scale design, how do you implement chaos engineering, and what are some of the consulting and implementation strategy on SRE. This is a great course and a workshop for you to get a lot more deeper insights on how we work through it. These are some of those testimonials that we have received from our partners. So I'll give you some time to digest. Well, I should tell that Manish is one part of the time was doing the gremlin exercise at 4:30 in the morning. That is the level of people get passionate about and commitment when they actually do these workshops with us. This is another partner of us who did the SRE practitioner of his experience in the APAC region. So there are great opportunities for you to get things, and because it's in a hot skill as well. So the upcoming trainings, we have a SRE Foundation training on 21st and 22nd May. If you are in APJ time zone, it is for APJ friendly time zone. The SRE practitioner is on the US time zone, but I see a lot of people interested from India and the rest of Asia as well, because they can complete their work and then start. So it will be 5:30 p.m. India time to 11:30 p.m. India time. So I already have a lot of registrations coming on. So if you have things, please do reach out to us at TaUB Solutions, and we'll be more than happy to take that. So I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter. You can reach out to me, and let's open it up for Q&A. So let's see where we are. What else that we can, if you have any questions on upcoming courses, on things, we have about 8 minutes, and I would like to hear from you. What would you want us to address as part of the conversation? I hope this session was useful for you to understand the value of site reliability engineering. I'm a very passionate guy on SRE. People who know me know that I talk, eat, sleep SRE, and because that's changing the whole dimension. And site reliability engineering is going to change the way we look at business, and every business is going to get tremendous value of getting this one done in an appropriate manner, right? So these are skills that you need to really enjoy being that. And I don't think you need to be a technical expert. If you are a technical expert, that's great, but it's not mandated, right? Because you're actually talking about an experience that we can leverage in how we operate in doing that. So I have great opportunities for site reliability engineers. There's huge opportunity for you to make that work. So if you have any questions to think, you can log into taubsolutions.com. And I'm also doing an SRE practitioner series. So if you go to our, so I'm going to kind of remove that and share my screen or as we speak. And tell you. So if I go to taubsolutions.com, and I would definitely encourage you to go there. You can go to resources, webinars, look at SRE, and you have a whole lot of practitioner series where I interview real world practitioners of their journey around site reliability engineering. So it's not just about academic interest, it's about how people have gone to implement SRE at their workplace. So this is with Jason Patterson at Nationwide. This is with people at Umbra. This is with Blockstream. This is with Racken. This is with Google, and you name it, with Adidas. So this is a great opportunity, in my opinion, that you can get free things, and it's also on a podcast. So if you go to a homepage and you like to know more about things, I have something called as a podcast for all of you, which is taubsolutions.buzzsprout.com, where all of those things. So if you want to be on an SRE, we have an SRE practitioner series. If you want to listen to business relationship management, we have business relationship management. So feel free to download all these things, because you can actually listen on ease like audibles and take advantage. Because for us as TaUB Solutions, we are committed to enhance the humans of DevOps and make sure that we build an SRE capability. I'm so glad that we have produced, as of date, 300 plus site reliability engineering practitioners. So we are so honored to be one of the topmost elite partner of the DevOps Institute to deliver this workshop. And people come to us because of our real world experience. I hope that you will take the opportunity to be part of our cohort, learn, equip yourself, and grow in your career, because the more you get succeed, we succeed, right? So I would suggest that you take full advantage of the conversations here and make sure that you take your career to the next level and beyond. And I think there's a great opportunity to do it. So it doesn't matter whether you are from service management background, you are from DevOps, you are more towards agile. It doesn't matter. I think because of the real reason that SRE is getting popular, you need to get yourself in line and enjoy the whole experience. So, any other questions? You have last 4 minutes. I'm trying to find out if there is any other questions, comments. Please put on the chat window if the session was useful. Was it helpful for you to understand the world of site reliability engineering? Are you getting excited about this thing? Would you like to know more about it? Please do put it on the chat window, because we want to focus on topics that is of interest to you as we do this LinkedIn Live event, right? So what other topics do you like us to present as part of the ongoing session is something that I think I want you to tell us. And then we will take enough amount of measures to make that really a possible experience, right? So let me know in your comments if you enjoyed this whole episode. If you'd like to connect with us and do it, it'll be absolutely fantastic. And I really appreciate everyone from the bottom of the heart. You had a very busy day, and some people it is late night, and people like Karthik joining, logging in from Singapore. Really appreciate all your time. Shelly, Sai, Sunita, Naveen. We have a lot of people dialed in. Shilpa, Jonathan, Muniz. Really appreciate all your time and all your questions. And I think we will continue to have these conversations. So stay tuned on LinkedIn Live that we kind of bringing in. The next LinkedIn Live is going to be on June 8th. So we're going to talk about AI Ops, which is artificial intelligence ops, which I know that it's getting very popular. So stay tuned to some of these things. And if you have any other questions or areas that we need to address, feel free to post it, and we will take it up from there. And I really thank everyone, and I wish everybody a great success in the site reliability engineering journey. And I hope I can interview some of you in your experiences as SRE practitioners. So with that, on behalf of TaUB Solutions, I wholeheartedly thank each and every one of you who listened to this event and who would also be listening to this event in future. And please do refer us if someone is interested to attend the site reliability engineering. It could be foundation, it could be practitioner. We are here to create more site reliability engineers and help you succeed in your journey. With that, thank you so much for all your time, efforts, and it's been a real pleasure to be a host for today. And until we meet again on June 8th, I'm signing off, Suresh GP, and I look forward to seeing you all in person sometime. Thank you very much.